I was out in the garden today, watering our beds, our beds where we are growing flowers and fruit and veggies and herbs, and all of those things. They required a lot of attention and work because we grew them for the most part from seed. So it's been months of daily care, in addition to preparing the place for them to grow. It's been a lot of work, and I enjoy it. Um, I like having my hands in the dirt. I like being outside. But as I was outside, giving the plants water and thinking about how I can't wait for them to get bigger so I can harvest, whatever it is that they're going to give for us. And as I'm dragging the hose around to make sure everything gets a drink, I start noticing how tall the flowers on the plantain have gotten. This is wild plantain. This isn't a thing that looks like a banana. This is a wild herb, and it's a medicinal herb, and so I will collect it sometimes for use for that purpose. But I was just noticing, even there in the ground, how much beauty it was adding to my surroundings, and really appreciating it. And I started thinking about how the things that are freely given are sometimes even more valuable, if not, at least as valuable as the things that we spend so many resources on, and how that's reflected in so much of our lives. I decided to clip a few of those flowers, and some of the taller grasses that are starting to go to seed, and make a little bouquet, because I just think they're really beautiful. And the more time I spend outside, and the more I get to know this little bit of land that we get to be stewards of, the more I see things around me that are valuable. The home that we live in was owned by my mother, and she's of the generation and the culture that enjoys, like just a big, wide green lawn, and everything else being pretty manicured. A few ornamental bushes that are always perfectly round, that kind of thing. And we're not quite those people. And by not quite, I mean not at all. We keep the lawn mowed for the most part, but we do let it get a little bit longer. And when you do that, that's when you see all these little things popping out. Like, I see wild sage, I see the plantains, of course, dandelions. And dandelions are one of those things that if you are exploring plant medicine, you'll come across dandelion again and again and again. The flowers, the leaves, the root, all very valuable. And of course, it's also the thing that if you're of a certain generation and older, and even now, depending on your culture and your values, people buy poison to get rid of those. So it's like you buy poison to get rid of a dandelion, and then you go to the store or the pharmacy and you buy things to try to help yourself be healthy. It's very upside down, and because those dandelions just show up, and they show up in places where you have not designated, they are considered not valuable. They're considered a nuisance even. And again, that just makes me think of how the things that are freely given are often not valued. And that's plants, and it could be information, and even, people. The things that you don't have to work hard for can often be so overlooked in your life. And I mean, I know I've done that. I've been on both sides of those equations. Like, there's a lot of wisdom in telling young women that you have to make a man work for it, and that can be sometimes related to purity culture, but it is the very tragic truth that is the case. And working for it can be, many things, not just sex, but working for all of the magic that gets poured on you when you have a woman's attention. When you don't work for it, you often don't value it very much. And, the reverse is true, too. Not getting into these gender battles. But as a woman, that has been my direct experience, the thing that I've been able to observe. God, this weather is so beautiful. So I'm sitting outside now, and this weather is just perfection. It's about 75. It's sunny, but I'm surrounded by elm and holly and poplar and pine and oak and mulberry and a few other trees that I can't really identify. And so I've got this dappled sunshine surrounding me in parts that are completely shaded, but it's just so perfect out here. And for the most part, there's some flower bushes too, some gardenia and camellia, but for the most part, the things around me right now that are creating this perfect environment, they weren't cultivated by any human. They arrived here and made their way, and they're providing something really valuable to me. And it's not just the large trees. When I bring my gaze down to the ground, it's all around. I'm familiar with dandelion and plantain and a few other things, because I have been, I don't know if you can call it studying herbalism, but I've been paying attention to herbs and how they can help for some years now. But I'm always learning. There'll be something that, is a weed, air quotes weed. And then I'll look it up, take a picture, and do some research and find out that it's food. It can be food. It can be medicine. And it's frankly beautiful. It's wonderful to be surrounded by green things. Some of them can be a little bit challenging, because they're so successful that if you let them do what they want to do, they'll take over everything. They'll take over your house. So you do have to beat them back a little bit, but even then, finding out how they're useful makes that task all the more rewarding. There are a number of sweet gum trees on this property as well, and I love them. I love how they look. I even love those spiky little balls they create in the fall. But they're so prolific that they will crop up everywhere, and that is particularly dangerous if they decide to plant themselves next to your house. Their roots can go into your foundation, things like that, so you have to stay on top of it. But I've learned only recently that that you can use really every part of the plant. I'm not that familiar with the uses, but when I think about it, I'm like, we go and work jobs so that we can make money, so we can buy things in stores, and then hire somebody to take care of the landscaping. It seems all very upside down. Like, if I can do landscaping work myself and then use the things that are on the land, I don't need as much money to pay people to do things or to buy things in stores. That means I don't need to spend as much of my time at somebody's job earning a paycheck. It's obviously a very simplified statement to make. Life is much more complicated than that. But the kernel of that idea is something I'm really trying to make sprout in my life. Another thing I've noticed, because I've lived in a few places now throughout my life, and then also as an adult who's a little bit more aware, the things that are available around you obviously change with climate, but they also change with the people that are there on the land, especially if you're interacting with the land. And I'm saying land, I'm not talking about acres. I'm just talking about wherever you are. You could live in an apartment and you're on the earth still. That is to say, the things that sprout up around you, if they are allowed to, can often be the very thing that you need. Especially if you're keeping yourself open to seeing what's around you. And then, again, if you're actually interacting with the land responds and gives you what you need. And that sounds really woo-woo, and maybe it is. But for example, it is pretty well established that breast milk is not the same from woman to woman. And that might seem like, well, obviously, our bodies are different, our diets are different, our lifestyles are different. But in addition, the breast milk is a woman's body makes the breast milk specifically for the child that she is suckling. And this is something that needs fact checked, but I believe it's the suckling. It isn't, oh, well, that child came from my body, and so there's some DNA connection. There may be that as well, but it's the interaction of the child actually suckling the mother's breast that makes the mother's body know what to make for the child. And so the earth around us is the same. You come to suckle at her teat, however that might be done, with, hopefully with like humility and respect. And she gives you what you need.